Thanks, Sarah. The final speaker in this strand is Sinead Keogh, and Sinead is the Digital Services Librarian in the University of Limerick. Sinead has worked at the University of Limerick since 2006. Following roles in subject support and research support, she now works in the Technical and Digital Services Department. As the librarian for the Digital Services Unit, she manages the UL Institutional Repository and, more recently, the Digitisation Laboratory and the Digital Library. So Sinead is going to present about supporting internal interns.
Thank you. So what I'm going to actually talk about is how we developed or added to a programme already existing for public history interns in the University of Limerick. So we have a Department of History, and they have a taught master's programme, as a lot of people do. And one of the electives is public history. And if you know public history is, it's many things, but one of the things I suppose you could describe it as breaking down the barrier between academics and public in interpreting history. And there's some quotes there just to explain it more. Public history trains historians to transform their research to reach audiences outside the academy, or the interactive process between historians, public and historical object. Now, if you take the public history module, it's an internship. It happens in the second semester over the 11 weeks, and there's a break in the middle for Easter, I think. And you have to go to some organisation that has archives. And the idea is you see what way it works, and then you get to possibly work in a collection in the context of public history, because that's your area of interest. And some of the organisations involved are Limerick History, or Limerick City and County Archives, Clare Museum, the Hunt Museum, and Foynes Flying Boat and Maritime Museum, and of course the Glucksman Library. And in 2014, which was a precursor to the programme itself, we had a student working with us, and he was interested in the First World War. So he worked on a lot of material that we used then for our Long Range Tipperary online exhibition, and it worked very well. So when they were developing this programme, we were delighted to take an intern last year, and he was very familiar with Limerick, and we have a collection, the Daily papers, and it's about the Daly family from Limerick. Madge Daly was the mayor in Limerick. Herself and her sister Kathleen were very involved in Conul. Ned Daly, Kathleen was married to Thomas Clark, so there was obviously a lot of 1916 involvement there, and a lot of material about it. So the stuff that he prepared we were able to use in our online exhibition, and it was great. But this year, Dr. Vincent O'Connell, who works in history and works on this programme in particular, he approached us and asked if we could enhance it with some aspect of digitisation. And obviously, if you're dealing with public history and presenting history to the public, being able to present digital items means that you can reach far more and do more things with it, even if it's just a digital library, or if you're going to scan something, present it. Like the middle image there is Magazine of Magazines, where it was a project done under the NDLR where they presented in a kind of page-turning format, and researchers added content over different aspects that they were interested in, they knew about. And obviously the biggest public history project ever here in Ireland was the 1916 celebration, and how, whether we knew it or not, we all engaged with interpreting 1916 again and thinking about it. And with this whole decade of centenaries, we are going to be doing more and more of this. So it is interesting from a public history point of view to think about this. So the first thing, I'm in digital services. I had to talk to special collections to think about suitable collections and what way we'd work the schedule for somebody over the period of 11 weeks. And then because we were only taking one intern, it was how we would actually give everybody on the course the experience with digitisation. So we decided to have two classes. The first one was just a general introduction to special collections and digital services. So the manual handling, how an archive works, why you digitise things and why you're digitising it to digitally preserve it, not just to digitise it. And then I got them for a 2-hour practical session, the whole class. So we actually took archival material, we got to look at it, think about why you'd scan it and what way you would scan it, think about the equipment you'd use, formats, and then the long-term preservation of it and how you describe it, and things like metadata standards that you would use for it. So our special collections intern came, our intern came, special collections, he was Zach, he was lovely, and he just arrived when the Bolton Library arrived, so he got a lovely opportunity to handle all those very old items, and Evelyn, who's here in the audience, who's in special collections, is actually going to be talking about Bolton Library, I think after the break. He also worked with a more traditional archive. There were papers from Tita Herima, who was a CEO of a very big multinational company in Limerick, and he was kidnapped by the IRA, and he gave his papers to UL. And he also looked at a completely different type of collection. We have a collection of postcards. Some are sorted, described, some are not sorted, some are not described, some are just in boxes. So just to give him an idea of what kind of collections there were. So then when he'd done all that, he came in to me, and at that point he told me what he wanted to do, and I told him what he couldn't do, and I crushed his dreams, because that's what digitalisation's all about. But we built his dreams back up again as he thought of other things he could do, and then we crushed them again. And he made, considering he only had 11 weeks and it had to be resource appropriate, I suppose. So we worked it out, and that's a very important step. It's probably one of the most important steps of having a digital project, is to actually think about it before you even start. So he picked postcards, and in terms of his output, he digitised a collection of postcards, he described them while he was in special collections, he encoded them using MODs, metadata object descriptions, when he came into us. And then he had to think about how to display them, so because obviously postcards have locations attached to them, he kept coordinate information in the metadata, so he was able to display it in a map. Because postcards obviously are sent as well, and they have times on them, or dates, he was able to do a timeline to think about that. And in terms of our involvement in the project, our feedback, so the host feedback, was very important because it goes towards his exam result. He also had to keep a reflective blog, and he had to give an oral presentation at the end. And in terms of him giving an oral presentation, it was very nice for him to show what he had done. And he got to tell his mum. He was delighted. The mother was delighted. The money wasn't wasted. So the benefits, obviously, when you have somebody in, an intern or new staff coming in, you have to spend time teaching them, and that can take away from what you're doing. But there were real benefits. Zach, the intern himself, he obviously has experience now working in an archive. The public history module itself now has another component to it, and not just for the intern that comes to us, we give it to everybody, we're involved, and from now on we will have that 2-hour class. For special collections then, they've had some material sorted, they've had some described that wasn't described before, and probably would have been on the long finger in terms of getting done. And it's available. There is an online presentation that Zach made with the map and the timeline if they wanted to use it. For ourselves in digital services, now we have this material digitised, which is great, and it's good quality. He created MODS records, so that's great too, because we can upload them to the digital library, free labour. And the other thing that came out of this, which was great, is ideas for a training resource, because we would get, obviously we're going to have a public history intern next year. We also get new members of staff. We get some staff come up during the summer months from other areas where they're not as busy, and just to be able to give them an introduction to what we're doing. So you will probably be familiar with All Aboard, and I know later on there'll be a talk which talks about it as well. The National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning, looking at, I suppose, different areas of teaching and learning, and looking at the digital capacity of our teaching and learning, and the CPD of teachers developed this Metro map, All Aboard, digital skills in higher education. And something that came out of this was the Shannon Consortium, which is the University of Limerick, Limerick Institute of Technology and Mary Immaculate College. And they collaborated to develop Take One Step, which is a program where they go around the 3 institutions and they would give courses. So either you can sign up to take a course or you can sign up to give a course in something that you're very familiar with, a digital skill. And it's to improve digital skills for students, for staff, and then to increase technology in your teaching. So we decided what we're doing, if you break it down, what we're doing are very unique little digital skills. There's something that we can add to this. So we applied for funding from Take One Step, and we've got funding now to create digital foundations, creating, managing and preserving your digital content. It's nearly done, and we'll be hosting on LibGuides. So it's not an information resource, it's a training resource. And it will show people not just digitizing, I suppose, but working with digital items, capturing digital items. I know, I'm just going to keep going. And blogs, HTML, everything involved with what you might want to do with an item if you digitize it. So that's the plan, and that'll be launched next week. So I just want to thank Evelyn, Special Collections, Vincent O'Connell in the Department of History, and Anne McMahon, who's also working on Take One project in Technical Digital Services. Thank you.